Well, I guess today technically qualifies as a serger tip clip. However, what I wanted to talk to you about today was my Wonderful Thread Artist Palette Pack paint box. In my last video where I showed you some decorative stitching on my shawl, I used my other collection, Bayside Blooms, the light pastels, soft pastels, which are really pretty. But today I wanted to show you the paint box, and I'm going to show it to you on the serger because the serger can handle so many decorative threads that a sewing machine can't, that I always like to make people aware of some of the beautiful threads that are out on the market. And believe me, this is my favorite. And the nice thing about this is 12 weight spaghetti Egyptian cotton thread. And I have found when I've done in-person events where all of the attendees bring their own serger. So I have a bunch of different brands all across the spectrum of price point and whether they're overlock or combo machines. But I have found on every single one that the 12 weight Egyptian cotton works beautifully. So it's a great thread no matter what serger you have. And there are just a few little things that you need to know about decorative threads that are helpful hints. And I'm going to show you how pretty they are on some of the different projects I've done. On my Gail's favorite Serger Totebag, I've used the spaghetti thread for reverse flat locking, for regular flat locking, and even for chain stitching. And with the chain stitching, I actually put 2 of the 12 weight threads in my chain looper. And it's such a beautiful effect, the way it just sits on top of the fabric. And it almost looks like it was couched on, like it's a cord that you purchased, but it isn't. And speaking of cords, I'm going to show you something really cool in just a little while. Before we go to the machine, let me just tell you a little bit about the paint box collection. As I mentioned, these are bright and bold colors. There are 10 spools in the pack. Each spool is about 110 yards, and they go from white to black, and then I have all bright colors in between. And we'll show you those colors on the front and the back of the box so that you can take a look at those online also if you wish to. But they're very bold, they're beautiful, and I use these all the time for all sorts of projects. So let's go to the machine and take a look at a few of the different ways we can use this in both overlock and cover stitch mode. I'm very excited to show you these. Oh, and if you're taking my cosmetic surgery class in Houston at the Houston Quilt Festival, you're going to be using some of these, and you're actually going to be doing one of these techniques or a few of the techniques in the class. So let's go to the machine and take a look at how we do it. It'll be like a preview of coming attractions. The next technique I want to show you is a 2-thread reverse flatlock, which gives me those beautiful ladders that you've seen on my tote bag. You've seen them on placemats as well as my table runner pattern, and I love weaving ribbons through. But I just want to show you what my setup is so that you know. I have a top stitch needle set up in the left overlock position, and it's a top stitch needle and 90-14 in size. And that allows me to thread it very easily with that heavier 12 weight thread. And if you're wondering about a top stitch needle, it has a deeper groove on the front and on the back. And that allows me to, number one, have room to thread the eye of the needle, but also it allows the needle to kind of guide that heavier thread as it's being stitched. I have serger cone thread, just a navy blue in the lower looper. Nothing in my upper looper. So what am I going to do? I am going to flip over my upper looper converter and then just click it back so that that little prong goes into the eye of the upper looper and closes it. When you're doing a 2-thread stitch, you really do need to close the eye of the upper looper, because if I didn't and I stepped on the gas, I wouldn't get a stitch. So that is something that you have to remember. And most of your machines will have an upper looper converter. Some brands call it a subsidiary looper, but they all look relatively similar to this. And this one is attached, which makes it nice because it can't get lost. I have my stitch length on, or excuse me, I have my cutting width on 9. And I want to show you on the screen, and I mentioned this in a lot of classes, is that the default settings for the 2-thread wide flat lock or reverse flat lock, the left needle is 1.5 and the lower looper tension is 4.5. But think of those just as a suggestion or a guideline. They do not have to be exactly that. So I'm going to bring my needle tension down to 1.0, and I'm going to really crank up my lower looper tension up to 9 because I kind of like the way that looks. Now, your machine may have some different settings on it and you want to look at your manual. But if you want to play around with that and test it on your scrap fabric, and testing is really the key to getting the look that you want, you can do that, and you don't have to stick with exactly what the manual says. So I'm going to close up my machine, and I think we're ready to stitch. And I forgot to disengage my threading tube, so now I can shut the door on this. So let's get our fabric and talk about stitching. Again, the stitch that we're going to do is a 2-thread reverse flat lock. So I've drawn a line on the wrong side of my fabric. Here's the right side, navy blue. And I've drawn the line on the wrong side because I'm going to use that as my fold line. I'm not going to bother pressing it with an iron because I don't want a permanent crease in it. But I'm going to fold my fabric right sides together so that those ladders show on the right side of the fabric. And I'm going to trim off a very scant 1/8 inch of the fabric as I go along. You can do this without trimming or cutting into your fabric at all, and by scooting the fabric to the left so that the knife doesn't grab it. But for right now, I am going to trim that off. And my stitch length is on 2.5. Differential feed is on 1 because it's a stable woven fabric. And I'm going to hold onto my thread chain, which is a good tip for anytime you're using thicker threads, until the machine takes about 4 or 5 stitches into the fabric. And I think we're good now, so I can let go of that chain. And let me just make sure my fold is where I want it. This is just a sample, so it's not super critical that I stay exactly where I want to be, but it certainly would be on an actual project. Use the cutter on my machine. And I've always said, no matter how many times I do this, I just love it. I'm going to pull open, and the 9mm stitch width on this machine is so gorgeous. It makes beautiful decorative ladders. So here we have that. There is my needle thread pulled to the front of the fabric. And this you can see on the back side is my lower looper thread. There it is, Serger cone thread right there. Now, so that is a reverse flat lock. And next up, I'm going to show you another decorative technique. Before I close up the front of the machine, I just want to show you what I am set up for. Now, the L890 has a memory for 100 stitches that I can save. And because I'm doing a special technique, I saved it in my memory on the machine. And you can see I have 4 12-weight spaghetti threads for a chain. And it's in the 3-thread rolled hem mode. I have my stitch length on 3 because I've got so many threads. And I'm all set to go on that, but I can just click on that memory and it'll pull up all of the settings that I liked for this particular technique. And I just want to show you in the loopers what I have. I have the carnation, which is color 39. And I also have the orange, which is color 40, and I have the dark turquoise and green in my lower looper. And all 4 of those, plus serger cone thread in my needle, are all set to go for a rolled hem stitch. So I'm just going to close up the machine, and there's no fabric involved in this particular one. This chain is so pretty for couching. You could use it for jewelry. You can even do something with macrame on this, and you'll get a beautiful effect. But with the 4 different colors, it really blends together. And it goes with a lot of different colors if you're doing this on an outfit. So I'm just going to move my thread. I think I accidentally moved it into the left needle position on the guide. And I'm going to pull that into the right needle one. And I'm going to get these threads right in back of my presser foot. It'll probably be easier if I use tweezers, but why make it easy, right? So let's get this all squared away. I'm going to put my presser foot down. So just to review that, I have my cutting width, even though there's no fabric involved. I have the cutting width on 5.5. I have disengaged my stitch finger. It's on R for rolled hem. And again, my stitch length is on 3. And that's variable, simply dependent on how many threads you're using and the look that you want. But I found the 3 gave me a really nice look with 4 12-weight threads and the serger cone thread in the needle. So let's just start stitching. And what I do is I just pull back and I try to keep an even amount of tension on the chain. And I like to hold on to my threads as I get going. And that's really all there is to it. Let me just pull it around front and show you how pretty that is. And we'll do a close-up of that. But you can see the orange, the green, the pink, and that royal blue in this chain. It's beautiful. And what I like to do before I couch it on or use it for anything else is, it doesn't look really kinky in this sample, but sometimes some of your threads can get a little bit crinkly looking. So I like to take steam in my iron and press the chain to smooth it out and flatten it out. It's so pretty when you do that. So I'm going to show you an example of how I couch it on also with a decorative thread, and I'll do a still shot of that. So that's one way to use 4 of your beautiful decorative threads all at once, and you can blend those colors any way you want. 2 in the upper looper, 2 in the lower looper, and the machine handles it beautifully. So I'm going to get set up for my next technique and show you that in just a second. The last technique I'm going to show you is in cover stitch mode, and I'm set up for a 4-thread cover stitch or a triple cover stitch. I have 3 needles with serger cone thread that's navy blue so that it matches the background fabric. I've already run off a 3-thread rolled hem edge with the 05 turquoise color, and you can see what a gorgeous rolled hem that makes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch with the right side of the fabric face down so that my decorative thread that's in my chain looper is going to show on the right side of the fabric. And I've got my differential feed cranked up to 2, and I've increased the tension on my needle threads for nice gathering. And I've drawn a line down the center of the fabric on the wrong side as a guide so that I can run my center cover stitch needle down that line, and it will be nice and even, and you'll see what a pretty ruffle it makes. To me, it almost looks like smocking. In a teeny tiny fraction of the time. So I've got my fabric under my foot and under the needles, because we all know that you need to have that fabric under the needles. And I'm just going to stitch along. My stitch length is on 3.7. It's fairly long because it is going to be gathered, and you'll see what it looks like. Let's take a look. And with these strips of fabric, I really use both of my hands to guide it along because it can kind of shift around a little bit if you don't. So, but I'm not pulling on it. I'm just guiding it. Okay, and let me just clip my threads and take a look. This makes such a pretty ruffle. It's gorgeous. Look at that, how pretty that is. Now, I could have put turquoise thread in my needles, but I decided I wanted them to match the background fabric instead. But I just think that makes the most beautiful, beautiful ruffle that you could use in garments, home dec. You could use it on quilting as well. But I just think it's so pretty. And because I've lengthened that stitch and given that thicker thread a little bit more room and space and opened up the stitch a little bit, I do think it gives the impression of either a decorative stitch or smocking. So I hope you try some of these techniques. Thanks for joining me today. Both collections, the Bayside Blooms and Paint Box, are available on my website, gailpatrice.com. And if you have any questions about any techniques using the threads or putting multiples together for techniques, feel free to email me, gail@gailpatrice.com. And I hope you love the wonderful threads as much as I do. Thanks for joining me today, and we'll see you again soon.